Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Tennessee Commission on Intergovernmental Relations. We're glad you're here today. We have a good agenda, interesting, and some very fine presentations ahead. I'm happy to be here as your chairman, but I do, by way of announcement, wanted to share that because I have a commitment back in my district, I will have to leave the meeting early today in order to honor that commitment. And I've asked Mayor Frank, to serve as a temporary chairman of the meeting. Unless there is an objection to that, she'll chair the meeting. She'll take over the gavel when I leave, and so we'll just have a smooth operation and no disruption in the transfer. Is there any objection? There being none, then when the time comes, I'll just hand it off to Terry. I don't have any other comments of my own, but I know that our director, Dr. Lippert, does. So I'm going to turn the agenda to him now for the commission and staff update.
Mr. Chair, before I start the commission and staff update, do we want to approve the minutes from the last commission meeting?
Well, is that a loaded question? Yes, we do. Thank you for calling that to my attention. Our chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from Senator Lundberg. Is there a second? Is there a second from Senator Campbell? Multiple seconds. Is there any questions about the minutes? Those in favor of receiving the minutes say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, under commission updates, we have one item under commission update, and as those who are here or have read the minutes will know, at our last meeting, Mayor Ryle and some other members expressed an interest in the commission studying several issues concerning rolling stock, including the purchase and delivery to local governments of rolling stock. These rolling stock things, large vehicles such as fire trucks, ambulances, school buses, police cars, those types of things. And there was an interest expressed in adding a study to our work program on this topic. Because it's a commission member requested study instead of a legislatively referred study, it takes a slightly higher threshold of our members to approve adding that to our work program. That threshold is 17. We do have enough members here to approve if there is support for this. So before we go to the staff update, if the chair agrees, we would like to, or if Mayor Ryle wants to speak to the study before we move forward with it. Mayor,
you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Senator. I think it's been said pretty well, but I think we all know that some of the issues that happens post-COVID, especially about delivery of certain types of equipment, emergency equipment, fire trucks, ambulances. One that came up with us this week during the weather event, obviously, is snow removal equipment, and then on into our equipment that we use for solid waste, about getting those out. We fortunately, my ambulance service director, Mr. Donnie Bear, he made some good decisions. We had we have several ambulances sitting idle that we put to work this weekend, because if we're going to tear one up while we're making calls, we're going to tear up an old one. But at the same time, we had to make some real tough decisions about what we were able to get out, because some of the turnaround times we're looking at on replacing this rolling stock is 18 months. And that's just unacceptable, especially if a piece of emergency equipment goes down, or vital equipment. So I know this is something that TACIR doesn't typically look at, but this problem has been out there. We're waiting on ambulances in Dixon County and some of the surrounding counties that were ordered in late 2021 that have yet to be delivered. So, and those, as we know, any of those top items, they're being used daily. They're running up miles and wear and tear, and taking a look at how we can maybe expedite some of that, how we can work collectively together to get those type things we need. That's what I brought forward. And we also had, where the mayor brought up the issue about school buses. We're really in the same situation on that. So that was the general theme of what we were asking, what we were talking about. And I appreciate y'all taking time to even listen to consider it.
This will take a motion to add this to the program of work. Chair will make the motion if there's no objection, and a second from Senator Lundberg. Is there any questions or debate on the motion? Do we roll call? We will, since this under our rules will require. It doesn't require roll call. Okay, thank you. No roll call. All right. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you. Director Lippert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, under staff update, we have a couple of milestones to recognize this meeting. First of all, our Senior Research Director, Leah Eldridge, is celebrating 25 years of state service next week. Leah, if you could stand, please. Leah? Briefly stood there. She is. Thank you. And 25 years, and all 25 of those years have been with the advisory commissions, which makes Leah the second longest serving TACIR member next to, me. And next we have our research director, Jennifer Berry. Jennifer is celebrating 10 years of state service, also all 10 years with TACIR. And then last but not least, Tyler Carpenter. Tyler has completed, he's the fourth staff member to complete TACIR's training pyramid program, which is a multi-step, extensive training program modeled on the Department of Human Resources' own training pyramid, but with some TACIR-specific things thrown in there. So congratulations, Tyler. And Mr. Chair, that completes the commission and staff update.
Attention to the next item on our calendar today, the Tennessee Valley Authority payments in lieu of taxes annual report, and we will require a vote to approve. It is in tab 3 in your book, and I believe, and I hope I am pronouncing the name correctly, ma'am, Jennifer Arzate. Good. And I believe, is this her first report? This is her first report here to the commission, so no pressure.
Mr. Chair, if I could, real quick, April and Teresa reminded me that I forgot something, and that was, if you'll recall at the last commission meeting, I let the commission know that we had a new staff member who would be joining us at the beginning of December after that meeting, and she is with us today. I've introduced her, but you've not met her, so Hannah Newcomb is our newest research associate. Hannah.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that introduction. And good afternoon, commissioners. Like previously mentioned, my name is Jennifer Arzate, and today will be presenting for your approval the Commission's report from Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA's, Payments in Lieu of Taxes pilot, and factors that may be affecting those payments, affecting those payments and their distribution to the state of Tennessee and its local governments. And once again, you can find this report under tab 3 in your docket book. This report is in response to Public Chapter 1035, Acts of 2010, that has made the Commission's monitoring of changes in the wholesale distribution of electric by TVA and its distributors for possible effects on the authority's pilot to the states in the Valley region an annual requirement. For a quick overview of the pilot distribution, please see Table 1 on page 4. And for an explanation on how payments were calculated, Appendices A and B. For federal fiscal year 22-23, TVA's actual pilot totaled $611 million, of which $410 million were paid to Tennessee governments, including $3.4 million in direct payments to counties. Payments for federal fiscal year 23-24 are estimated to total $588 million, decreasing by about $23 million. The decrease resulted primarily from a decrease in the amount of power TVA sold to customers, caused by milder weather conditions, and lower sales to industries. In federal fiscal year 23-24, payments to Tennessee are estimated to be $394 million, decreasing by $16 million, of which $3.4 million will be paid directly to counties. Although Tennessee receives the largest share, its percentage decreased once again, falling below 67%. This decrease is attributable to decreases in both the state's share of TVA's power revenue and the value of TVA power property. For state fiscal year 23-24 allocations, excluding impact payments, they will increase by an estimated $2.2 million for counties, by $927,000 for cities, and by $2.7 million for the state's own agencies. Impact payments related to TVA construction will decrease by $273,000 for counties and by $158,000 for cities because of project completions in Sullivan and Washington counties. The total payments, including impact payments, are estimated to increase $5.4 million over those made in state fiscal year 22-23. Because of the 3-month difference between the state and federal fiscal year, the state's fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 3 months earlier than the federal fiscal year, Payments for the state fiscal year will be increasing despite decreasing for the federal fiscal year. As a result, Tennessee's distribution for state fiscal year 23-24 includes TVA's payments from the last 3 months of federal fiscal year 22-23, when the pilot had increased. For a more detailed look at the distribution of monies to cities and counties, excluding impact payments, please see Appendices C and D. And for impact payments set aside for local governments and counties with TVA construction, see Appendices E and F. There were 2 important factors mentioned in the report that would affect TVA's pilot. The first being that effective October 1st, 2023, the TVA board approved a 4.5 wholesale rate increase, which is estimated to produce an additional $405 million of revenue during federal fiscal year 23-24, excluding adjustments made for changes in the cost of fuel. The second factor concerns provisions in wholesale power contracts that 147 of TVA's 153 distributors have signed that grant these distributors flexibility to obtain renewable energy from non-TVA sources, potentially reducing TVA revenue and therefore the pilot. Under Public Chapter 1035 Acts of 2010, power purchased from entities other than TVA is subject to the equivalent payments required, but the payments may be reduced or eliminated by credits claimed for other taxes paid. Only 4 distributors in Tennessee have purchased power from entities other than TVA in federal fiscal year 22-23. And as of November 2023, the credits claimed have exceeded the payments that would otherwise be owed under the Act, and as a result, no payments have been required. At the moment, Commission staff have no recommendations. However, for purposes of monitoring compliance with Public Chapter 1035, the Commission finds it would be beneficial for the Department of Revenue to request a list of distributors purchasing power from non-TVA sources. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Members, are there any questions? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. There being no questions, thank you very much, ma'am. And we are now at this time going to take a vote on it to approve the report. The chair will make the motion to approve. Is there a second? May I have a second, please? Commissioner Bryson. All right. Now, wait, we're not quite through. Do you have any questions? There being none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd call your attention now, members, to the next item on our calendar, the annual report on Tennessee's public infrastructure needs, and it's the final report for approval, and it will require a vote. For further reference, you can go to tab 4, and Mr. Tyler Carpenter, our research manager, is going to make the presentation. Mr. Carpenter, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, today I will present the annual Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory Report for your approval. The report can be found behind tab 4 in your docket book. This year's report includes projects that are or will be in the conceptual, planning and design, or construction stage at some point during the 5-year period of July 2022 through June 2027. I now want to draw your attention to a few points of interest in this year's report. First, if you will turn your attention to Figure 1 on page 9, you will see that the total estimated cost per capita of all needed public infrastructure improvements in Tennessee increased for the 8th consecutive year, but remained flat when adjusted for inflation. In Table 1 on page 10, you can see that in this year's inventory, state and local officials reported a total need of $68 billion, which is about $5 billion more than last year. The categories most responsible for the reported increase in total estimated cost are health, safety, and welfare, and education. Infrastructure needs for health, safety, and welfare increased by $2 billion, or 22%, and now totals $11 billion. Most of this increase is from the $1 billion rise in needed improvements for water and wastewater, which include a $506 million increase for a project in Nashville, Davidson County. Education needs, which include both K-12 and post-secondary institutions, increased by $2 million, or 13%, and now total $17 billion. Post-secondary education costs increased by $1 billion, or 22%. New public schools and additions increased by $454 million, or 13%. And a breakdown of education infrastructure needs can be found in Table 2 on page 14. Notably, though the transportation and utilities category increased for the 8th year in a row, the total cost of transportation projects decreased by $31 million, less than 1%, largely because of project completions and cost decreases. Regardless, transportation continues to make up the largest type of need in the inventory with $35 billion in reported needs. Now, the final point of interest I want to highlight is that the percentage of funded infrastructure needs reported at the time of the inventory, at the time the inventory was conducted, increased by 1% from inventory year 2021 to inventory year 2022. As projects move from the conceptual to the planning and design and construction phases, you'll see more projects being funded, more funding available for those projects. This was a brief overview of the reported needs in the current inventory. If you would like to see how your county is performing, please look at the county summaries, which start on page 21. Appendix D contains information on project type and stage of development, and Appendix E contains information related to school districts. And lastly, I would like to thank the development districts for all their hard work in collecting this information. I also want to thank Presley Powers and other TACIR staff that have been incredibly helpful in the development of this report. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and with that, I seek approval of this year's annual Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory Report. Thank you.
Motion by Mayor Frank to approve. Is there a second? There's a second from, all right, Representative Williams. And before we take the vote, is there any discussion or questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to see that the transportation was flat year over year, I guess, or relatively flat year over year, does your infrastructure report take into consideration the revenues that were budgeted last year for this fiscal year? Was that the reason why it was flat, or was it flat because we weren't growing in need?
So it was the biggest driver so there was actually a decrease. It just wasn't that big. However, that decrease was driven by completed projects.
Okay.
And so when a project is completed, it falls out of the inventory. And so that total number will go down. So that was the biggest driver. All the data that is in this year's report is whatever was reported as a need as of July 1st, 2022.
Got it.
So there's a bit of a lag between, because they spend the next year collecting that data from state agencies and local governments. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said, if I heard you correctly, that the differential was inflationary. The inflation was the main reason for the cost increase, right?
For transportation or the
Just
inventory?
in general.
I can't pinpoint exactly why, but the inventory, the biggest drivers of the inventory, as I mentioned, were health, safety, and welfare and
Right,
education.
okay.
So
Yeah,
usually inflation or cost increases and.
For some reason, I thought you'd said mostly inflation, but then I also heard about the wastewater and everything. So I was just trying to figure out where we saw that increase.
Yeah, so I think, I'm sorry, I didn't catch this at first. I think what I was referring to actually was in the beginning of my presentation where I mentioned that when adjusted for inflation.
Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha. I misheard you.
So we
Okay.
tried to track the
Totally.
costs and then adjust it for inflation. going forward.
Totally makes sense then. Thanks.
Questions? Any other questions? With there being no further questions, I believe it is already in front of us properly by motion and second. So we will, those who are in favor approval of the annual report for Tennessee's public infrastructure. Say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Carries. Thank you. Thank you very much. A water wastewater panel discussion for presentation and discussion today, and I refer to you tab 5. Could we have if the panelists would like to come forward, and I'll ask Ms. Moffett, our research associate, to introduce the members of the panel. We'll just take them in the order that you are seated, I guess, unless the director suggests another method. I will ask the members that we hold our questions until the end of the presentation, not at the end of each presentation, individual but at the end of the total presentation. Then we will take questions, and you certainly can direct your question to any one individual panel member. So we can do that. Ms. Moffett, are you ready to introduce our distinguished panel? Most need no introduction. They're very well known, but we want to give them the courtesy of a proper introduction.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commission members. I will be introducing the panel today on the Commission study, Operating and Financing Wastewater Systems. We will present the draft report of the study at our next meeting. Much wastewater system infrastructure in Tennessee is outdated and in need of being repaired or replaced, and the state's steady population growth has led to an increasing demand to expand existing facilities or build new ones. However, the high cost may hinder the ability of local governments to carry out these tasks, leading to potential risks for both public and the environment. The Commission was asked by County Executive Jeff Huffman to study operations and financing of the state's wastewater systems during the January 2023 meeting. He asked that the study examine the conditions of Tennessee wastewater systems, the governance of wastewater utilities, best practices for management from other states, and new technologies and methods for management. In addition, he asked that the staff review the best methods for financing wastewater systems and reducing operating costs. As a part of the staff's research, several key stakeholders have been identified who are knowledgeable about Tennessee's wastewater systems, their operations, and financing. Our panelists before you today are Brooksy Carlton, the Assistant Commissioner of Community and Rural Development at the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development; John Greer, the Program Director at the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts; April Grippo, the Deputy Director of Technical and Permitting Programs at the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation; Vera Jones, the State Water Infrastructure Grants Manager also at the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation; and Steve Wyatt, the Utility Operations Consultant at the Municipal Technical Advisory Service. I will now turn the floor over to them. Thank you.
If I may, unless there's an objection, we'll just take them in the order that they appear on the calendar, and that would make Ms. Brooksy Carlton, the Assistant Commissioner of Community and Rural Development for ECD, our first presenter.
Thank you, Chairman. It's good to see y'all today. Good to see so many friends. I provided a little handout. This is the handout. This describes ECD's funding opportunities for water and wastewater systems. We have a couple of funding sources from state funding that the legislature provides us, and then we have some funding sources from the federal government. Our infrastructure planning grant is our newest program. We have $10 million this year going to that. We got in 90 applications for that funding, so there's a huge interest in understanding what water and sewer needs are across the state. We study inflow and infiltration. We study water loss. We do asset management planning, things like that with the funding. That has been such a great program for us for the last couple of years and been one of our big focuses. Site development grant is focused on industrial sites, providing water or sewer to those. Community development block grant gets into our federal funding Most of you are very familiar with CDBG. We spend about $30 million a year in your communities, and most of that historically has gone to water and sewer. Lots of repair and replacement programs with that funding. And similarly, ARC, Appalachian Regional Commission, and DRA, Delta Regional Authority, that funding goes to communities in East Tennessee for ARC and West Tennessee for DRA. We often do water and sewer projects with that money as well. So I think a lot of y'all are familiar with those programs. We don't do too many incredibly innovative things with those programs because the needs out there are for repairs and studying the systems and understanding what the problems are. That's what we focus on. And the only other thing I want to say is that we partner with TAUD, we partner with the Comptroller's Office, and we partner with TDEC for every single project that we fund to make sure that our work is lined up with their priorities. They have a better technical understanding of what the needs are, so they review basically every application that we get in to make sure we're funding the right types of projects. So, and our funding is kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what TDEC has available, so we're just making sure that we're continuing the work that they are doing. Happy to answer any questions, Chairman.
We will take questions after all of the panelists have made their presentation, and thank you for yours. And I believe our next panelist is John Greer, who is the program director for the Tennessee Association of Utility Directors.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. So good to be with you today. As a moment of personal privilege, I have my county mayor from Williamson County and the county mayor in Dixon County where I grew up here. So hopefully friends, but will yet to be seen.
Well, don't make any mistakes in front of them.
I wasn't nervous until I saw them here. Yeah, my name is John Greer. I'm the program director for the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts. I've worked with many of you locally with your utilities when I was the utilities director for the Comptroller for about 10 years, and now with TAUD, we work to support over 400 utility members throughout the state of Tennessee with federal and state contracts that we provide technical assistance to utilities of all shapes and sizes. What I've prepared for you and you have in your packet today is just a brief overview of the different types of utilities you will find in Tennessee. I think it's important for us to understand that not all utilities are created equal, and not all of them are under the same code. So it does help when we have just a general overview that I will go through briefly. The two main types of utilities that you deal with on a day-to-day basis are publicly owned. When we say publicly owned, we mean governmental utilities, cities, counties, authorities, utility districts. And then secondly, are privately owned, which I would call your attention to the largest privately owned utility in the state as the example, which is American Water in Chattanooga, or Tennessee American. So when we talk about privately held, we're talking about investor-owned utilities, cooperatives, HOAs, property owners associations. Again, I'm going to give a brief overview here. This information was sent in beforehand, so if you have any questions after the panel's done, I'm happy to answer them in more detail. But typically, as most of you who are local government officials know, most of our local utilities, government utilities, are ran by mayor and council. There can be boards appointed. We don't see that as often. Most of the time, the governing board of the city or of the county is the governing board also of the utility. So again, that's in your packet. And then with utility districts and authorities, our county mayors appoint those in almost every district in the state, except for just a handful that are still elected by the customers. But those are county mayor appointments. So for those of you who are county mayors here, I believe I've talked to each and every one of you at one point about appointment or how an appointment is made. You do that every 3 to 4 years, depending on your utility. And those utility district boards can range from 3 members up to the largest we have, which is 9. And that utility serves 27 counties, which is Middle Tennessee Natural Gas Utility District. In the state of Tennessee, the publicly owned or governmental utilities are regulated by the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, which is housed in the Comptroller's Office. They regulate to ensure utilities are self-sufficient financially and are not losing too much of their water. And private utilities are regulated by the Tennessee Public Utility Commission. And if they are going to operate inside a government, they must also get a franchise from that government to be able to operate inside the city limits. So that is basically what I have for you today. We have a couple other utility types with co-ops and property owners and homeowners. Those are very uncommon in the state when it comes to water and wastewater. Most co-ops we have in Tennessee are electric, so I will leave those out, but I did include them in your slide so you could see them. And Mr. Chairman, when the panel's through, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, and we will allow the members to offer questions when the entire panel has completed its presentation. Next, April Grippo, the Deputy Director of Technical and Permitting Programs with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here. Chairman, my colleague, Vina Jones, I didn't hear her name mentioned, but I'm going to be speaking today about some challenges facing wastewater systems, and she has some opportunities for improvement in addressing those challenges with some financial tools. May she speak after me?
Is there any objection? Is she? Where is she?
That's Vina Jones, V-E-N-A.
She is on the list.
Okay, great.
She will follow you, as a matter of fact. And since you've mentioned it, I will mention there was a typographical error, and the name is Vina, V-E-N-A. Yes,
Perfect.
she's there.
I may not have heard that. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks a
that's
lot.
quite all right.
I'll be
Continue.
speaking today just giving an overview of wastewater challenges that we are facing here in Tennessee. TDEC regulates municipal and industrial wastewater systems, requiring permits for anyone discharging pollutants from point sources into our state's surface waters. And these permits limit the amount of pollutants that may be discharged, requiring wastewater treatment. For a new wastewater system, the permitting process can take between 6 months and 12 months. So just wanted to be aware of that as we're considering possible new wastewater systems, especially those in West Tennessee. TDEC works closely with any new wastewater system on design requirements of the wastewater treatment facility, along with the permit limits that will be required. And we currently have about 250 wastewater systems that discharge to our surface rivers and streams, and another 675 that are non-discharging systems. So those may apply treated sewage to land through land application, or they may discharge to a larger system. Maybe a city just has a collection system and then they discharge to a larger system that makes its way to a river or stream. For those existing systems, TDEC has several programs in place to assist wastewater systems in meeting their challenges. But I'd like to share with you today a couple of the main challenges that are facing our cities, and those have to do with accommodating growth in the form of new residential, industrial, and also retail sewer customers, as well as maintaining the existing sewer systems. A key challenge for both TDEC and wastewater systems was referred to by Brooksy earlier, and that is I&I, or inflow and infiltration. Inflow referring to stormwater flowing into sewers, and we're just seeing more and more of that as we have these more frequent, more intense storms inflowing into the system. And then also infiltration, groundwater getting into the system through breaks in sewer pipes, holes or cracks, and we're seeing more and more of that as well in aging systems. Obviously, cities didn't anticipate this much water being in their systems when they designed their wastewater treatment plants, but all that extra volume creates a lot of headaches for wastewater operators and decreases the efficiency of treatment at their plants. I&I overload sewer systems. It can cause sewer backups into homes or buildings, and then it can also cause sewer overflows, with sewage overflowing into streets and potentially reaching rivers or lakes. On days like today, when we're having a rain event, TDEC routinely receives calls from citizens who are making us aware of their observations of overflowing manholes or signs that they're observing of sewage, like floating toilet paper in ditches or streams. And so this is a significant concern for TDEC as we tackle enforcement for these systems and make them aware of these concerns. We're currently working with wastewater systems across the state on reporting such overflows and using these as an indicator of overall operation and maintenance concerns, and we're helping them to prioritize rehabilitation priorities. With the unprecedented development opportunities and pressures that we're seeing in Tennessee today, these wastewater systems are facing increased flows as more houses, businesses, and industries are requesting connections to those already struggling sewer systems. When those overflows are already a problem of too much water in a sewer system, adding that flow to a system that's already experiencing problems is a huge challenge for wastewater operators. Across the state, we find that maintenance is one of the biggest problems for wastewater systems, as I'm sure many of you have experienced and would expect. And a lack of maintenance funds combined with increased problems with I&I leading to overflows can be a big challenge. Now demands for more sewer connections, adding flow, they can feel as though they just can't keep up with those costly sewer improvements. Another significant challenge that we're facing today, and that many of you may have experienced, is the lack of qualified wastewater operators. I imagine this is a challenge for growing communities all over the nation, but we just have so many of those right here in Tennessee. It's really hard for those cities to attract, train, and keep qualified wastewater operators. Many of our experienced operators in Tennessee that we work with on a daily basis could retire at any time. They're nearing that age, and I'm hearing from wastewater managers and our colleagues at municipalities across the state that they are having trouble not only recruiting and hiring staff, but sometimes they'll have staff and they'll leave on their first day. They'll leave for a lunch break and not come back. Or they'll only work for a couple of weeks only to leave when they get another job, making a little bit more money at a restaurant or an industry. So it's a real challenge in Tennessee. They need committed operators to work in person, and it's harder and harder to keep those staff members and find them. I'm hoping that we see a shift in recognizing and appreciating those who work to clean our water to make that job more attractive for candidates. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, and as I mentioned, my colleague Vina will speak to possible solutions, but I will conclude on a positive note. TDEC has several programs and opportunities, a toolbox approach, if you will, for wastewater operators as we work with them to solve these challenges. Regionalization, connecting and consolidating separate wastewater systems may be a solution for some cities. In regionalizing those systems, we'll be able to share not only technical staff, but operators as well as costs to run those systems. I believe that these partnerships hold promise for helping wastewater systems to meet the needs of their growing populations. Thank you.
And thank you. And next, Ms. Vina Jones, who's the State Water Infrastructure Grants Manager with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. You have the floor, and you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for having me. My name is Vina Jones, and I manage the infrastructure funding assistance programs at TDEC in the Division of Water Resources. This covers all American Rescue Plan infrastructure funding, state water infrastructure grants, like Senator Yeager mentioned, and also the State Revolving Fund Loan Program. In 2021, the department was awarded $1.35 billion from the governor to invest in water and wastewater infrastructure in the state of Tennessee. And we wanted, as a division, to really think about how to spend that money thoughtfully and deploy this funding to help improve existing resources and the lives of our citizens across the state. Really thinking about all of the lessons that we've learned and issues that we see as a regulatory program, and how can we make good use of those funds so that we could honor the funding and make sure we have a good return on investment. With that, we used the existing Tennessee Infrastructure Scorecard, which was a tool developed in the State Revolving Fund Program in partnership with TAUD, looking at allowing utilities to self-identify what their most critical needs were. Some of the things that April Grippo mentioned, really aging and failing infrastructure, as well as significant non-compliance, was at the top of our list to see if we did in fact have systemic critical needs or if we could turn the money to some other direction. We had over 390 systems do the self-assessment and identify that 75% of our systems had at least one critical need. 40% of those systems identified as having aging or failing infrastructure. That's infrastructure that was not working as it was intended or that was far past its useful life. Facilities components or distribution lines that were 60, 70 years old, way past their ability to function properly as intended. And we saw that at least 25% of our systems, of our wastewater systems, had significant non-compliance issues. So we decided to make sure that we were addressing these critical needs by requiring any wastewater utility that wanted to participate in the American Rescue Plan funding address critical needs with the allocations that they were awarded. That, coupled with the work that we've done in the State Revolving Fund Loan Program, we awarded over $477 million in American Rescue Plan funding and $254 million in State Revolving Fund monies over the past 3 fiscal years. Together, the Division of Water Resources has focused our investments to an amount of $731,783,000 for wastewater systems focusing on these critical needs. When the committee wrote what were some of the best practices the state of Tennessee could use to help wastewater systems, we looked across the nation and saw that 44 of the 50 states in the U.S. had asset management plan programs that expected their utilities to operate with adequate technical, managerial, and financial capacity so that they knew some basic things like what assets do you own, where are those assets at, what condition are those assets in, and how do you intend to pay for those assets when they break. 71% of our systems in the state didn't have or don't have, they're getting them now, adequate asset management plans. So in 2021, 2022, the state stood up an AMP program. We collaborated with other funding agencies in the state, like Brooksie's Group and USDA Rural Development that also funds systems, and worked with our partners, TAUD, to build a program that was scalable for all systems so that even our most rural and vulnerable disadvantaged communities could understand how to improve the management of the assets they had and identify critical assets that were in desperate need of repair. So I stand before you today with good news. We have invested nearly $750 million in the past 3 years on wastewater, but there are still so much more to go. We know that I&I is a chronic issue as well as old and failing lines. So the State Revolving Fund Program, over the next 3 to 5 years, intends to continue to direct the funding that we have to address critical needs for, investing amounts close to probably $250 million a year. And part of the reason why we have that much additional funding is because we received significant influx from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which gave additional funding to the state revolving fund programs for both drinking water and wastewater infrastructure financing. So I'm more than happy to provide any statistics or data that the committee would like to have. I don't have copies of presentations like my friends at TAUD, but more than happy to answer questions and provide details.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones, for your report. And next, we have Mr. Steve Wyatt, who is the Utility Operations Consultant for the Municipal Technical Advisory Service.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Wyatt.
Good afternoon. It was a fun drive in from West Tennessee on the interstate today. Wasn't it?
What's the matter?
Most of you do not know me like you know some of these people up here, so I'm going to take a little bit of time telling you who I am. I'm the Utility Operations Consultant at Institute of Public Service in UT. Prior to coming to UT in 1998, I spent over 17 years at Jackson Energy Authority. So as mentioned at the other end of the table, I'm one of those aging licensed operators. I still maintain my Class 4 wastewater treatment license, my Class 4 water treatment license, and my Grade 2 distribution license. I looked at the Fleming Training Center website, and there's about 6,500 licenses currently listed there, okay? But that does not mean you have 6,500 people who are licensed in the state, because I have 3 of those licenses. I have quite a few compatriots which have 4 or 5. So in Tennessee, I suspect we only have around 3,000 plus operators, and TDEC, I believe, has 13 different license levels that they have based upon the requirements, okay? So we are an aging group. I think last year our common age was around 55, 57 years old. So we're beginning to gray out and go out the door. So that's what I am. Now, my job at UT, I'm to assist any of the municipal utility systems in water, wastewater, or natural gas, operational issues, finance, utility board member training, and operator training. I tend to deal with the smaller utilities. Occasionally I'll work with big boys, but usually that's in the training venue. But I tend to deal with the smaller utilities, and I know their problems fairly well. In Tennessee, you have a wide variety of types of treatment. The simplest you will have will be a lagoon. Think of it as a pond. That's a facultative lagoon. We still have a couple of those. It's just a holding area that the wastewater goes in and over time is discharged. So we go from that facultative lagoon to aerated lagoons to trickling filters to oxidation, aeration ditches or Schreiber units to sequential batch reactors on up to more sophisticated systems like microbiology rotators and pure air systems. So the technology is across the board in Tennessee. Most of your high technology processes are in larger systems which have the economic base to fund it. When you get down to the smaller systems, they don't have the base. That is the issue. We have quite a few towns in Tennessee which do not have centralized sewage collection and treatment at all. And most of them probably will never have centralized sewage treatment due to cost, bottom line. We've got quite a few towns within Tennessee which are on a moratorium, either self-imposed or imposed by TDEC, due to chronic sewer overflows, okay? And that's due to cost and repairs. So down at the other end of the table, they were talking about repairs. We do have an aging wastewater infrastructure in Tennessee, tremendously. We do have a disparity on treatment techniques within Tennessee. Treatment techniques can be adversely, that's not the right word. Treatment techniques basically are guided by what TDEC issues to us utility with their National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. Every 5 years, a treatment plant gets a new permit, and the conditions of the discharge and how they operate can change based upon changes at EPA. Sometimes those changes can force a utility to add more processes at the plant, which is cost of money. So right now, to sum it up, I'm going to be quick. Wastewater is expensive in Tennessee. It's complicated. It's a liability for the system that's running it. We are having trouble enticing qualified individuals to step up, get the time in to take the test. Current pass rate of the operator's test is around 45%. It takes a lot of people 3 times to take the test. Tests are usually given in May and November. And it's a struggle for smaller communities. There's a lot of communities in the state do not have their own licensed operators. They have to contract with another operator who's allowed by their utility to work for them or hire an outside firm. I know of one community lost their operator and is using an outside firm, and their costs basically tripled on labor to have the outside firm. So I'm going to hush, and I will be glad to answer any questions that I can from y'all, from my old operator stance.
Thank you very much, Mr. White, for your report, and thank you all, panel, for some very substantive remarks and your adherence to the time limits. We do appreciate that, and I know there are many questions from the members. If there's no objection, I would like to lead off with just one question, and then I'm going to turn the gavel over to Mayor Frank. But I wanted to direct my question to Mr. Greer. Since you've got your elected officials here, give you a chance to shine. My question is based on experience that I'm having in my rural Tennessee district, and I think that it is a problem throughout rural Tennessee, where we have utility districts who are are financially insecure, financially unstable. And of course, it's the unofficial policy of folks to encourage these smaller utility districts that were created years ago and now they're in trouble to merge with a larger utility district so we can fix that problem. But one of the issues that makes it hard, and this was an experience that I had with 2 utility districts in my district. One of the things that makes it difficult is that when a utility district merges into a solvent utility district, then the solvent utility district must show all of those, must depreciate all of those assets on their financial statement, which then could put the solvent utility into a financial difficulty unless they raise their rates to pay the depreciation. And I realize that this is an accounting procedure that the national or international accounting agencies require us to do, but there's such a thing called a caption bill. I've got a caption bill that I'm trying to figure out a solution to this problem, and I'd like your thoughts on that or any suggestions. No problem, that's an easy question.
I appreciate that simple question. So to your own point, yes, depreciation is an accounting standard
Yes.
that we as the state of Tennessee have for many years followed because we have a perfect bond rating as a state, and it is directly tied to the health of our local government. So when the state, and I'm speaking from my past experience with the state, when the state really looks at those policies, that's always been the conversation is we don't want to hurt our bond rating by doing something that hurts the accounting procedures and policies at the local government level. That
Had a lot of water and water services in rural Tennessee.
And I think 2 things. One, important to keep in mind, those standalones, they still are governments. They still follow all the same rules and policies of a municipality. They just don't. The way I would explain them to people is utility districts are created for a certain purpose. Most of the time it's water. They don't have taxing authority, but they are fully government. Under 782, it says they're looked at like a municipality. So that is important to keep in mind. The second thing that is important to keep in mind is the Comptroller's Office now has a new tool with the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, a new fund that is allowed to help in merger situations. So I'll use the terminology suggested. When a merger is forcefully or unforcefully suggested to 2 utilities, if that merger goes through the Comptroller's Office, the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, they have a fund that can infuse some cash into fixing utilities. That doesn't necessarily fix depreciation on the back end, but the reason depreciation becomes a problem for utilities is because if they've lost money for 2 years, including that depreciation, they get referred to TBOR, as it's called. So if they go through the process, though, of merging, taking some of the money TBOR gives them, TBOR then will have the flexibility to look at the depreciation and see what needs to be done. So even if they're referred for financial distress, the board may say, well, we're not going to have you raise your rates right now until you figure out how the merger is going through. That is something that they've talked about at their recent meetings. So those are 2 newer tools. That was passed, I believe, last year, so that's fairly brand new. I mean, we're not even a year into it. So that is one tool I would say to keep in mind with the mergers like in the area that you're dealing with.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I'd like to continue this discussion. Perhaps if you would consider calling the office, and we'll set up a time to discuss this, because this is new information to me.
Be happy to call the
And
office.
I'm going to use this time now to turn the gavel over to Mayor Frank, because I'm going to leave in a few minutes, and I'm going to let her manage the debate here. And thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Senator and Chairman. Any other questions for the panelists? Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor Frank. Mr. White, I too struggled coming in. Potholes the size of cars and white wall rain and trucks on I-40 are not a fun way to spend 2 hours and 45 minutes. You made a point that I think is broad. I just have one point for you and then three quick questions. But you made a point that's plaguing governments, and I'll just say across the nation, but specifically, at least in Tennessee, just in professional services. It's been very hard, especially in recent years, for local municipalities to hire and retain talent for advanced degrees, finance, engineering, law, for that matter. And honestly, it cropped itself up most recently for the state legislature when they were looking at the Tennessee criminology labs, forensic labs. So often we're losing people, and then we have to go and hire the firms that hired those people away at that rate into the private sector. So I hope that those that are on the legislature can help us solve that issue, because money whipping, it's very hard to keep up with the private sector that has endless access to capital. But it's something that's been a problem for us to deliver services in Memphis. I'll direct this question to either, is it Ms. Grippo? Ms. Grippo or Mr. Jones? I'm curious, you were talking about statistics, and you mentioned a lot of percentages of entities that were failing. I'm curious to know what percentage of the entities you referenced have enterprise funds that are specifically set up to deal with future capital improvements and maintenance of these wastewater systems. Anybody that wants to take it, let me toss up.
Thank you. I'll take that one. So when we talk about utilities, they are all enterprise funds under state law. So they are all set up as enterprise funds. I believe what you're talking about would be more of in the common market, we would call it a sinking fund, a capital fund sit back. So with depreciation that Chairman Yeager was talking about, that is a built-in fund that these utilities get each year that they don't pay out, but they have to fund it. So most utilities, there's not a standard or stock number that they have a certain percentage set back, but most utilities do have some type of reserve fund for infrastructure, or at least now, because of the work TDEC is doing, moving forward, they will have a fund set up because of the asset management plans. But all of the governmental utilities in Tennessee operate as an enterprise fund.
Okay, thank you. And you answered my question, which is that sinking reserve fund. And then this last question, I'll just combine them just so we can move along more quickly. Memphis has been a topic of discussion with Blue Oval and the anticipated increase in economic development in the western part of the state. And we need to be a good partner, right? It needs to be a regional growth strategy. And so I'm curious to know, as Chairman Yeager alluded to with the merger, compact has come up quite often in our part of the state. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether or not we should support a compact that, in the western part of the state, because so many resources for us, especially even with you look at Blue Oval, a lot of those suppliers and parts will run through the corner part of the state, and wastewater is no different for us. Our facilities, our concern is opportunity cost, right? Like, we've invested all of this time, money, and energy in our wastewater system, and now we're being asked to share it, and we need to, but we have to have a path that's financially viable, because we're going to give up a significant amount of opportunity cost, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Is the question, do we agree with regionalization in West Tennessee?
Well, if you agree with regionalization, do you agree with supporting a compact so that more federal funds can flow in? Because the support of having 3 states, so the compact for us would be a regional compact. It would involve Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And so now you're fighting for federal resources as a larger lobby. It would be the thesis behind those supporting it, and I'm curious to know your thoughts.
I mean, I think that's a very interesting question. I think that some of the things I would think about is how we're going to make sure that we don't ignore or forget our most vulnerable communities in Tennessee, those rural communities in the shadow of Blue Oval, for example, and really think about the operator issue as well as the depreciation issue, and say, are we going to address true cost accounting in terms of our rates and make sure that we are, that we're addressing the cost of wastewater services so that we provide living wages for operators and can afford the operation and maintenance? We have seen issues with shared services across state lines, so I think that's harder for me to answer, but because I know some of our rural communities on state lines right now do struggle with equitable services. Do you have anything to add?
I haven't really thought much about an interstate compact until you mentioned it now. I think most of our focus on regionalization has been among Tennessee communities, so I'm kind of trying to think in real time. I'm part of a national organization, the Association of Clean Water Administrators, and there are some interstate organizations in that organization, so I'm interested if maybe we could canvass them and ask them about, lessons learned. I would imagine that some of those may be, what do you do if the neighboring states have different levels of stringent goals, for water quality standards or other things? Would the compact have to meet, if, I don't know with the neighboring states that you're talking about that would be an issue, but just thinking about some challenges that we might face. But it sounds like a really great opportunity to leverage additional funds. I mean, you're the money person, but thinking in real time, I think that it might be good to reach out to some of those other organizations in the nation and find out what they've learned.
And I know we need to move on, so I'd love to follow up with either one of you, because it really is more about seeking federal funding from those larger buckets, because now you're lobbying together. To the point, we've got Blue Oval, which is 45 minutes from where I live, and now Governor Reeves has signed a $2 billion deal in Marshall County, which borders the state. So if you look at all of the potential economic growth that is going to occur in that region, in that 200-mile region over the next 10 to 15 years, it is sizable. And so, again, it goes back to how do you look at, and we just ended up in a federal lawsuit with former Senator Mark, now Judge Norris, dealing with Horn Lake because we were giving so much service to them over the years. So it's really less about service and more about resources and looking down line. You've got municipalities, again, like Memphis, that have the infrastructure built. Now it's about opportunity cost of sharing those resources in a meaningful way. And if you're going to start to combine wastewater districts into regional units, how do you go and lobby for more resources for them and not just put it on the back of Tennessee bondholders?
Executive Huffman?
Listen, Ms. Jones was modest in her introduction. She's handled these ARP funds for TDEC, and she's been overloaded, and they're a regulatory agency. They never were meant to handle that kind of a regulatory load. And her job's kind of been getting the money out the door with all these regulations, so I want to commend her for what she's done under these circumstances, trying to get money out to folks who really need it. She's gone from dark to dark, and she's done a very good job for TDEC, and I want to commend her for that publicly. I do have some questions, and the report that came out from TACIR in 2008, corroding and failing sewer lines, if you go back and look at that report, that was 15 years ago, and they talked about the need to replace sewer lines that were built post-World War II through that big growth era in the country, and this was 15 years ago when they talked about that. And so there is a lot of growth in Tennessee, and there's going to be more growth, as the councilman said, in West Tennessee. But what's existing is really what worries me the most, because the cost is enormous. It's not only the cost of replacing the lines and the treatment plants. Most of these lines are in a road. And so now you're looking at the cost of replacing the transportation system where you've got these lines. The fiscal capacity of a community or utility district to meet the massive cost that it requires to really do this right and protect the environment is a complete mismatch. There's just no way under the existing circumstances. And so I suppose my first question is, I believe in the 2008 report, they said there were 450 systems and 80 of them had enforcement letters against them. What does that mean when you have an enforcement letter against you? And have we got more now? Have we got less? Are we making any headway? Is it about the same? How's that working?
I'm sorry, I didn't come with the statistic for what enforcement looks like, so I'm not aware of a number to tell you about. But I will say that TDEC, we generally work to bring the systems into compliance, and so we don't go to orders. That's not our first line of defense in helping a water system or a wastewater system come into compliance. We usually work through notices of violation, so when it gets to an order, it's usually that the problem has gone on for some time and the water system or the wastewater system wasn't able to address that in a timely fashion. We sometimes enter orders when there are threats from a third party that they will provide a lawsuit if TDEC doesn't reach some form of enforcement, and so we'll work with the wastewater system on an agreed order or a consent order. So those are, I guess, to think about what those mean they typically have time frames and goals for making some headway towards improvements. They can help a wastewater system to prioritize, but I think, I know sometimes wastewater systems have told me that sometimes it's helpful to have an order. I mean, no one really wants one, but maybe they've been going before their board for 5 or 6 years asking for more funds and didn't get them, and so it has some regulatory teeth attached to it.
So the order is kind of the last resort.
It is a
right?
last resort,
You work with
yes.
it. You don't have any idea how
I'm
many?
sorry, I can
okay.
give you that number later today. I just don't have it in my head.
Memphis, for example, has got their issue. I believe the last cost I saw was between $1 billion and $1.4 billion, the infrastructure need on wastewater sewer. And, we know about the lawsuit. And I had lunch with Judge Norris not too long ago, and I promised him we wouldn't talk about wastewater, and we didn't. But the mayor of South Haven, Mississippi, says their sewer rates may have to go up 300 to 400% at the end of this time, because the judge gave him 8 years. I don't remember how long it was to basically detach themselves from the system and get up and running. In DeSoto County, they've got a regional system. They've gotten about $262.5 million over the last 22 years through a Corps of Engineer program, and that's the kind of pot of money you've got to access if you're going to deal with these kind of huge solutions. They're costly, and they're getting more costly. Oakland out there, which is growing in Fayette County by leaps and bounds, they just added a small portion of the wastewater treatment plant, $27 million for a town the size of Oakland to expand the treatment. So the numbers don't match. If you're a town and a mayor who wants to protect the environment, if you're really serious about that, you've got to be frustrated, because the system that's in place does not allow you to fix it. As long as you can only have an enterprise fund, as I see it, and no other source of revenue, and you throw in the depreciation the way Tennessee handles it. Not all states handle it the way Tennessee handles depreciation. But if you handle it that way, it's just not going to work. You can have all the best intentions in the world of protecting the environment, but the numbers, the methods that are used now don't work. The money that Ms. Jones is getting out the door and they're getting through the SART program is going to be an enormous help. But at the end of the day, these small municipalities are still going to be struggling. Stanton, Tennessee. Stanton, Tennessee is right next to Blue Oval. They can't handle what's coming. If you look at the 2020 tax aggregate report for Stanton, Tennessee, the entire city, the city property, the houses and everything is worth $16.7 million. And so the capacity's not there. There's got to be another way. The other thing I want to say is this on depreciation. Depreciation is supposed to work, and I've always looked at it. Ronnie Neal, the mayor of Somerville, always corrects me. I hate talking depreciation with him. I'm saying you're paying for the system that you've got now, the principal and interest on the construction, and you're paying any depreciation, which is a system that's going to come in, 40, 50 years from now. You're paying for two systems now, aren't you? He says, no, that's not the way it works. And it's not. In theory, you reserve the funding for depreciation. That's not what folks are doing in reality, ladies and gentlemen. And so we really have to figure out a better way. I mean, everybody get in the room, from the Comptroller's Office and TDEC and the Municipal Technical Service, and see if there's a way that we can modify the way wastewater is funded in Tennessee, not so much through grants, but through what kind of source can we have locally that's going to help us meet the needs for these systems, because it's getting worse. And everyone here knows, I mean, every week now you hear about a system that's in trouble. I mean, Tipton County right now, we've got a municipality that's got a system with 31 miles of water line, no water. People have not had water for 15 days, and tomorrow I've got to make a decision as to whether or not to declare a state of emergency. They don't have the fiscal capacity right now to do what they need to do. So I'm coming from the standpoint of, from an operating system, looking at it locally in the long term, what modifications can be made to help fund these systems, enterprise plus, or an enterprise system plus something else? For example, can you use TVA in lieu of taxes to fund an enterprise fund to help with the depreciation cost? Is that possible? It's not taxes. The courts have ruled it's not taxes, but it's revenue. That might be helpful. And then the other thing I would say is this. Tipton County's got a bill up here, and it's going to be a regional approach to wastewater sewer, wastewater sewer. Fayette, Tipton, and Haywood County. It's going to form a regional board. It's going to be autonomous. It's based off of the way Dixon County operates theirs and the way DeSoto County, Mississippi operates theirs. We see what happened when DeSoto County, Mississippi got the money from the Corps of Engineers that they got years ago. It took off. We see what happened in Mississippi when the Nissan plant came in on the interstate there, and they built a wastewater treatment facility, one facility but two units. One unit served Nissan, the other unit in that treatment plant served the community. And what's happened to North Jackson and Canton through there now? And so that's what, in terms of Blue Oval, we've got to be looking at for our area. But at the end of the day, these small rural towns, even the medium-sized towns and big cities, are all struggling with how you operate these systems under the current regulations. Sorry, Madam Chairman.
Thank you,
I
Executive.
went off track there a little bit.
Very good comments. Does anyone want to address anything? All right. Senator Yarbrough, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate everyone for the presentations today. My question's going to be on governance, and I'll give a heads up to and really at the state level, and so I really want to direct this to Ms. Grippo and to Assistant Commissioner Carlton. So we started this meeting by talking about the inventory needs of the state, which far exceed our resources. And of that $68 billion in needs, about 10% of it that's identified is in this wastewater space. And I think, Mr. Grippo, you spoke to the fact that there's lots of, that we've got some places that there are real deficiencies, both in like the quality of facilities and in the systems in place to manage some of these things. Mayor Huffman just talked about the fact that we have need for new tools and strategic approach to this at the statewide level. And if anything, this panel has convinced me is that there are lots of players here. There's lots of entities that have different shapes and sizes and makeups and varying levels of technical, capacity and financial capacity. So, like, how are we managing this as a state? Like, who has responsibility for executing a strategic plan here over the longer term? And to the extent that that is clear or unclear, is there anything we need to do to clarify or strengthen the authority and capacity that state management or state coordination leadership function has?
I guess I'll speak a little bit on that. So, Vina Jones.
Pardon me if I...
That's okay. When Mayor Huffman was speaking, I wrote down statewide strategic infrastructure planning and investment, right? I don't think any one of us here have responsibility for statewide infrastructure planning. The Department of Environment and Conservation is largely a regulatory agency. The funding we have helps support those regulatory requirements to ensure minimum level of service. But I do think that agencies across the state are talking about statewide infrastructure planning. We have conversations with the Department of Transportation and ECD and others. I don't know, so I would urge this body to, move forward in thinking about how, these members, you guys, could help us create that. I mean, I don't think we don't have that role, but I think it's obviously critical because of all the variability and the age and the cost to provide service.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Anything else, Senator?
That's my only question, but I would value hearing any other responses from the group if there are specific initiatives that other states have tried or that we think or authority that we could actually create somewhere that might help in that longer term coordination.
Yes, John.
Yes, thank you. I just did want to take a second and commend the state for what they're doing right now with the study of utilities and the ARP funding. That is something that some other states are not taking advantage of. They are frankly just throwing money at problems, and as you know, most of the time you throw the money away when you do that. So our state taking a statewide approach through Ms. Jones and her program and her vision have started the process of what I'm hearing you envision, which is a statewide infrastructure plan of some type. We have one pilot study going on right now in Lawrence County, which will be the first countywide utility plan that we're aware of in the state. That is the type of thing, hopefully, when we finish that in the upcoming year or two, that you can take and look at a more wide-ranging picture of how can we scale this to a larger level. But I do think the state deserves credit for what they're doing with the ARP funding and understanding infrastructure needs, because that had not been done in the state of Tennessee at this level before now. So Ms. Jones and her team have done a great job, and like I said, I just wanted to commend them. And I think we're heading in that direction from a utility standpoint. We're getting more data now than we've ever had, and we can't make a plan without the data. We know that. So the first step is getting the data. We've started doing that. We've been assisting them in doing that. And at least moving forward, we'll have a platform to step on to go into the direction we need to go, but we're still building that base now.
Thank you. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. And this is actually part of what I wanted to talk about. I think, Ms. Jones, you mentioned $477 million in ARP funding, $254 million, I think, in state revolving funds, for about $731 million. Now, I know on, I think it's TDEC's website, I think $1.3 billion was allocated from the accountability group to go toward this. Looks like a billion was allocated in various types of grants, which leaves another $500 million out there. I know one of the challenges we've had with the bipartisan infrastructure funds and ARPA funds is that we haven't been able to use all of them. And as a result, some have come back, and we're still trying to figure out what to do with those remaining funds. And so just wanted to find out if you can, and maybe not at this setting, but talk about if you could access more of those ARP funds, how much would you need? What would be a good starting place? Because I know, again, as we've had funds go out and they haven't been able to be used, that we don't want to have a situation when I think 2026 is the deadline. We don't want to be sitting here and I wish I could have asked for, because we could have used $500 million, be the scenario, and no one knew about it. So again, you don't have to do it now, but just think about it, if you will. Let us know as you're planning. But if you have an answer today.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that this commission is aware that we have obligated $996 million of the $1 billion for the non-competitive. Drinking water consumes, the other over $500 million, and there's also a smaller portion that is allocated that is already obligated under contracts for stormwater. We have about $200 million of that 1.35 that are awarded to competitive grants and special state strategic projects like wastewater regionalization in West Tennessee. So we've actually obligated 90% of that 1.35 billion. Some of it is in other smaller contracts, partnership with TAUD, and then working to develop transparent data dashboards for you all, for us, for citizens, to help us understand where our infrastructure needs are and where the money is actually going. We do have more struggles in the state revolving fund program because that is a loan program. Although we give entities 20 to 50% loan forgiveness, especially those disadvantaged communities. But providing that debt service can be a barrier to some, and that again goes back to true cost accounting, rates, just the bill at the end of the day to address and repair these facilities.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And don't forget when you get a chance to, what you could use. Thank you.
Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for this presentation. How is our water? I mean, generally, and I ask this because, Attorney General's Committee has filed a suit against companies for PFAS in the water up in Northeast Tennessee. It's something, maybe we're made of plastic at this point. It's something that I'm very concerned about, and I think, everybody is. And so I guess my first question would be, do any of these new technologies and methods for management address increasing concerns about that? And I guess we'd also say pharmaceuticals and pathogens and all kinds of concerns that we may have. And then just secondly, I'd like to know kind of generally, and maybe it's not a uniform answer. Maybe some areas are better than others, but generally, how is our water and what are we doing about that?
Hi, John Greer, TAUD. I will start there. With PFAS. So the Attorney General did file suit. National Rural Water, who is a larger group of state associations like ourselves here in Tennessee, also has filed suit. There's a settlement now for utilities to get funds to help treat PFAS, PFOA, PFOS. If I get them all correct, forgive me if I did not. There are several, not many, but several, systems that have tested. We're really in the beginning stages of testing for those types of what you've heard on the radio and TV as forever chemicals that stay because of your clothing, because of different cookware, any type of fire supplies that are putting out fires. They contain this compound. It is becoming more and more of a national issue. However, Tennessee, in the testing we've seen, has been very fortunate that we have not had levels as high as other areas. So while there are some positive tests, the treatment technology for getting that out of your system can be fairly simple and can be done at the smaller plants. I was with one 2 weeks ago on the Tennessee River. They have less than 1,000 customers. They're adding what they would call charcoal to the equation and getting the PFAS out of their system. So there are technologies that can handle those. I would tell you we are still in the very early stages of understanding the magnitude of the problem, if there is one, then coupling that with the correct technology of how to treat those. But all of our local utilities have been vigilant to understand the issue. TAUD, along with TDEC and MTAS, I know, have been teaching classes about this. We have experts in this field in our group that go across the state teaching utilities what to look for, how to test, all the variants that come with some type of emerging pollutant or something that we're not really certain about. We may not have all the information about. So we are on top of that. I know TDEC is on top of that. I'm sorry if that didn't fully answer your question, but I think there is a lot of good happening in the state around that, and we're ahead of the curve of most places.
Well, thank you for that. And I just say that along with Attorney General Skrmetti, I actually don't think we should have to do that. I think that along with states like Minnesota, and I'm running a bill actually to ban PFAS in our state because of that. There are corporations that are already complying with other states, and I would even argue that maybe we're putting companies that aren't that are doing that, complying, at a competitive disadvantage when we allow people into our market. And the toxicity of these PFAS can be pretty intense. I mean, people die if there are certain levels, and the levels, at least in Northeast Tennessee, were high enough to reach that threshold. So I really do worry about it, and I really thank you for all the efforts that you're making to track that, because there's nothing more important than our air and our water. So thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Yes, Mayor Waters.
Thank you. A statement and then a question. A statement is, I think we all deal with utility districts that have issues. I know in Sevier County we have one that has constant issues, and it's not a county entity, but I do appoint the board, and it's a revolving board, because when they get there and see they don't have any funds to address this and the rate's about as high as they can go, then I get a resignation letter very quickly. And it's the unfortunate thing for my office is when these folks are out of water, that's who they call. And are you going to get me water? I've been out for 4 or 5 days, and I need water, and somebody told me you could get me water. And I said, well, if we can get bottled water up there, we might get it. It's the only way. But I think we all deal with that, and we know what kind of significant issue it is. The question I have deals with these package systems and how they fit into what's going on in the state. In Sevier County, in the past, we didn't have any hillside regulations, because if you build on a hillside, you had to have a septic system and a field line, and if you're on a hillside, you're going to have several acres of land in order to build that rental cabin. And about 2000, somewhere in there, the state began looking at these package plants as municipal sewer plants. And so therefore they came under our planning regulations as you can put these homes very close together. So we have a significant number of package plants out in the county. Some of them have like 100, 150 homes, 200 homes on these package plants. And we've actually tried to tighten some regulations locally about that, because who's inspecting them? If they go bad, who's going to repair them? I know what's supposed to happen, but a lot of times it doesn't happen, and if they were to fail. But how does that fit into what we're talking about? Because in these rural areas, I think these package plants, I know in Sevier County, are becoming more prevalent, and they're using them to build subdivisions and to do other things in, because it doesn't have the regular municipal systems out there. And I guess the concern is, how does that fit into what we're talking about? And for the future, how does that fit in when it comes to a system fails? Who's responsible for that? And because now they're becoming 25 years old, will soon be when they started coming in there, so they're going to start having to have some repairs. But we have a number of those, and I don't know, probably across the state. But how's that fit into what we're talking about here?
Yes, sir, I'll take a stab at that. I'll say I don't think it fits in necessarily in a positive regard, because we really struggle with compliance of package plants and some decentralized systems. And I appreciate that your county, Rutherford County, and some other counties have had to put in more stringent standards when you found that these package plants weren't really meeting their initial goals. I just have to say, across the state, in state government, I should say, TDEC currently is under pressure to possibly relax regulations regarding package plants to make it easier for developments that come into rural areas to build. So that's a challenge that we're currently working with. Mayor Huffman asked about enforcement. I'll bet my lunch money that when we pull up those enforcement numbers and I send them later, quite a few of those are going to be package systems. We have a lot of trouble with those package systems and who operates them. They have obviously a lot of trouble finding operators. There's sometimes contract operators that only stop by occasionally, may not be conducting the inspections that the permits require. And so from an enforcement perspective, we're really struggling with keeping package plants in compliance.
Yeah, and as I said, we adopted a number of additional regulations locally to address some of the issues you just talked about there, because we were concerned because we have a number of them in Sevier County. Anyone else?
I will just add that, we talk about consolidation and regionalization as some of our answers to help solve capacity issues, to help solve the cost issues and level of service issues. Splicing them up and making more and more smaller systems, right, is going, the opposite direction from that. If we see that our municipalities, that our government-run enterprise funds trying to do their best for their citizens have at least 40% aging and failing, 25% significant noncompliance rate, and struggle to maintain technical, managerial, and financial capacity, I think it's right to be very concerned about all of the small systems. And are we not, we should start thinking really more about that statewide strategic infrastructure planning and how that plays out for Tennessee's future.
And I want to just add as well that, there are systems that have done it correctly, like Ms. Scrippo mentioned in Rutherford County with Consolidated Utility. When we looked at their scorecard, they had 73 package plants, I believe it was. They've done it correctly. They don't have issues. They have understood that the way for them to grow, because they do not have a large regional plant, and even if they did, for them it would be much more expensive to push sewage from one side of the county all the way to the other. The way for them to grow is to have small package plants for each subdivision or a grouping of homes, and they've done it correctly, and they've been very successful at it. So to your question originally about where are we going, I know the state has some really valid concerns about it, and I do agree that there is a lot of pressure. I get a call once a week at least from a utility asking me, is it a viable option? And the answer is always, it depends on your level of technical ability, because if you have a high level of technical ability, running one of these small systems can be done. If you're asking an already overused operator to try to learn that and be able to keep up with what's happening at one plant and smaller plants, it can be tough. But I do think that when we look at the landscape of utilities moving forward, it is part of it. And package plants are going to continue to be around until we come up with a different treatment solution. So we're all going to have to deal with them moving forward.
And that's sort of where I was going in a thing. It appears to be, especially in rural areas, that could be one part of the solution, but you've got to be very targeted in how you approve those. And when we adopted our additional regulations, we did look at Rutherford County and what they had. And I think, so far, knock on something, so far we haven't had, a significant amount of failures in our systems. The concern is what happens down, 30 years or so down the road, but we haven't had a significant amount of failures, and we're trying to do more right now to regulate and make sure that doesn't happen. But it appears to me that that's probably going to be one part of this puzzle, especially for rural areas, and we would certainly, those in state and local government are going to have to look at that and make sure that we have in place the appropriate regulations so that these package plants can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Anderson.
John, good to see you, by the way. to hitchhike on what Larry and Jeff have said, we have gone through some of these processes in our county. But I'm sitting here wondering, does the state really know they've got a tiger by the tail when those systems start failing? Because I told the chairman, Madam Chairman here, that I wasn't sure I wanted to ask this, but I really need to. How do you bond a package plant? Because when that failure occurs, and we've had 2 of them in our county, not package plants, the county has to step up and pay for those. Even in an HOA, you're not going to get those folks, and all of a sudden you got a public health issue with 200 homes, Larry. So my question is, and you're looking at development, breathing down your throat to relax the rules, somebody better be looking on the back end of it at bonding capacity and how you bond a package plant. I think you all have, and I'll go with Denise up here if she doesn't mind answering it, the difference between an occurrence and an aggregate. I think the state's on the hook for that package plan on an aggregate basis across the state of Tennessee. And John, you might could answer that.
So to your first question about how do you bond one, it would be up to the owners to bond it. So
That's that's like this chicken and the fox.
You're right, yeah. It would be up to the owners to bond it unless there's a mechanism that allows county governments to permit and bond those. But with the state
if I
being...
can interrupt you, we tried that, and the state didn't like that.
So then it would be if there's any type of bonding tied to their permit, which I'm not aware of there being.
I believe there's a fairly minimal financial security requirement, but I think it's not very substantial.
Right. So that may be something to think about is when you give a permit, do you require some type of bond that if they fail to meet that, you have, failure in one of the areas that we're familiar with that you're speaking of? Is there a way to counteract the financial impact that will happen for the county having to be the group that steps in?
Or as the state?
I can't underestimate the pressures that the state is under right now to relax those regulations, and just want to say that at a recent public meeting to discuss a potential rule change that would affect package plants, the testimony of Engineer Michelle Hatcher from City of Franklin and talking about having to take over some of those failing systems was very, very powerful.
Just as a follow-up, it gets real powerful when you have to dig into your reserves and start shelling out. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had one in the late 1980 something, and I think that one reached over 400,000. So just the cost of that and the technology, and I really think there ought to be tougher, more stringent bonding requirements, and they are not going to like it. But I'm not going to like it either when we have a failed system.
Any other questions? Yes, Executive Huffman.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Well, first of all, let me just comment on, Larry said if you're from Sevier County and you live on the hillside. Well, who from Sevier County doesn't live on the hillside? That's everyone. I guess my question is, of the package plants that you all have seen, the ones that have been permitted, is there one type system that works much better as a stand out in the others? And then the other statement I'd make, I guess, is concerning the Consolidated Utility District. They've actually got regulations that are stricter than TDEC's regulations on some of their operation. And what they do is, when there's development that's interested, the development goes to their planning commission. CUD is there. They're there from the very beginning. And they walk the thing through, and they say, this is the system you've got to build. And my understanding is that they only approve one kind of system. They're not going to let one system over here, a different type system over here. This is the kind of system you got to have, number one. Number two, When construction starts, we're going to be there on site going through it with you to make sure you build what you said you were going to build and what was approved during the planning process. And then number three, my understanding is that, and they told me under no conditions do you have the developer own the facility once the development is completed. It's got to go to some kind of a public entity, utility district, some entity that can take care of it in the long term, and you transfer the entire ownership and all over to that entity. So he said, if you do anything on a regional basis, just approve one type of system and make sure you've got, a sustainable entity in place to operate those things. And then the last point I would make concerning Consolidate is that keep in mind the systems that they've done and the way they've operated, their first system was in 1999. Well, that's what, 25 years ago now? So they're doing something right there. And it's a good model for folks if you're really interested in long, sustainable package plants. You need to look at what they've done, because a 25-year-old package plant that's still operating the way it's supposed to, that's what you're looking for. But I guess my question to you all is there one system that works much better than the other systems that are in place?
The answer is I don't know. And I don't know of any one standard system that utilities use. I think Consolidated has done it correctly, and the proof is in the pudding, as my dad would say, that they don't have failed systems. Excuse me, and they're, like you said, they're on top of it from the very beginning. They do have a system they know and they prefer, and a model of a system they know and prefer, and it's because they've seen it work and they want consistency across their entire area. The comment I would make there is utilities, local government utilities, have the ability to tell developers what type of system they must use. And so if you want to come in an area and develop, you have to use this system and you have to have these specifications.
Are you saying they don't have the authority?
They do.
Right, okay.
So it may be beneficial for more local governments to know that they do have that ability.
Yeah.
Because we do see sometimes developers go into a local government and just say, this is what we're doing, and they don't realize they can say, no, you have to build what we need for our system. So I think that's a very pertinent point you make of local government should be involved from the very beginning of the process there to make sure they get what they need moving forward, because it will be theirs once it is dedicated over.
Well, there are about 13 developments that are looking in our county relative to the Blue Oval growth, and 10 of those are package plants. And so that's concerning for us, how we're going to handle that. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Waters.
Just one other comment about that, and it would appear to me, going off what Jeff said and what Rogers has said, that these are going to only increase in the state of Tennessee, because a lot of folks here from different counties are like Sevier County and have a housing crisis. I mean, we have a 1% vacancy in our county right now. If you want to move to Sevier County, you can't find a house. So everybody's looking for any kind of way to build homes, and not just build one on 2 acres. They're looking to build them close together because land is so valuable. So it appears to me it's going to be more and more of an issue, not across the state, as everybody looks for a way to address this housing issue. And it almost comes down to using these package plants. And the good point is, what's the best one, and how can local governments work with these developers to make sure that we have the best technology, and that they're going to continue to be a part of trying to keep the system up, because it's going to happen. I think it's already happened to a lot of us, but it's going to continue and it's going to grow. So what we've got to do, and I think what the state's got to do, is try to look and see what the best technology is and how we best can assure that these systems continue to operate.
And I'm happy to connect anyone with the leaders at Consolidated, Roger Goodson, their CEO, and then Brian, who heads up their package plant division. have been great partners with us at TAUD and with other local governments coming in and helping them understand the regulations they have in place and what they've seen be successful. So if you want more information or want to connect with them, I'm happy to make that connection for you.
All right, any other questions? If it's okay, without objection, I have just a couple of brief questions, if that's okay. Okay. Mr. Greer, I believe you mentioned there was a fund that could be accessed for forced mergers. This goes back to Senator Yeager's question. Could that fund also be utilized for voluntary mergers?
That is a great question for the Comptroller's Office, and while Dana does not work in that division, I know they are the ones that are helping oversee that fund through the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, and I believe the way the fund's set up currently is you have to come through their board, so that would be a question for them. I don't believe the fund's been used yet, so they may not know the answer yet, but
well, I
would
can
reach out
even
to
speak
them.
just locally. I know we have some systems that have issues, and there's a willingness to merge or even have a regional discussion, but then it gets down to the political perceptions, which are, some of the small towns don't have the physical capacity to address the long-standing issues. And so then you have ratepayers in a particular jurisdiction under a solvent, a water authority or whatever the utility is, and those citizens say, I'm not paying, I'm not going to, that's not fair to raise my rates in order to fix the problems that were not addressed in town X or town Y. And so if there were a way to incentivize that, to assist in that merger from a state standpoint, I guess I'm lobbying here a little bit, but I think you would see more mergers happen if there were a way to do something like that. So that's just a question.
Yeah, and I think that was the premise behind the change in the law. That fund had been set up for some time, but had never actually been funded. So now that it's funded, I know when we met with all your local utilities at the courthouse, March 2022, we were having this same discussion then, and that was not on the books then. So that passed last legislative session, I believe. So it is a good way to incentivize when you come and you have two utilities and you say one of them has a problem, and if that problem was not there or if that problem was addressed, we would be more amenable to a merger. And you can go in front of the board and say, here's the problem, here's the cost, and see if they have the availability to fund it. So I do agree with you. There needs to be some type of incentive for these mergers because it is hard to look a solvent utility in the eye and say, you need to take over your failing neighbor and your customers have to pay for it. And I know that's something Vina has looked at with her funding and the grants they have is mergers and regionalization. And I'm sure they'll continue to do that because I know that's a real point of emphasis for them. And I let her speak to that if you want to. But
Sure.
The TBOR fund is specifically there for mergers, so it can be helpful to those types of entities that we know you're talking about. So.
Thank you.
So the Division of Water has a little bit more money than the TBOR funding, and we've recently awarded about $100 million, maybe a little bit more, in regionalization grants, and we also provide infrastructure planning and design grants for regionalization, consolidation, and of course loan forgiveness programs. We only go up to 50% loan forgiveness, but with a high emphasis on regionalization and consolidation through the State Revolving Fund Program.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have is you mentioned looking at, Vina, I believe it was you or maybe April, you mentioned the asset management plan that basically you looked at the entire nation, what are they doing well? 44 of them had the asset management plan. What about governance? And we've talked about governance today. What's kind of the gold standard for governance? And, I bring this up, I want to be clear, this is not a criticism of municipalities. It's not a criticism of the systems I have like Larry where the mayor appoints. But there's no literacy from my standpoint on, I don't know utilities. I'm a county mayor. And then who am I going to put on a board? I don't really know who to put on a board. I'm not told what the standards are. I mean, I have some insight from a political position. And this is, I guess, the second time I'm mentioning politics here, but those boards are in demand. They're usually paid boards. They usually come with health insurance. And so you might not have someone with the technical skills, but maybe they're a retired mayor or a retired county commissioner, or they're a very important person in the community. And so we're not maybe doing what we should do. Is there a gold standard for governance for these systems?
So I don't know if I would call out a gold standard for governance or not, but I do think that we commonly see municipalities struggling more than utility districts, who are kind of independent and may operate a little more like a business, in that technical comprehension and will to account for depreciation or rates. The Tennessee Association of Utility Districts does a good job of trying to make sure all board members are routinely updated with education, and we speak to them regularly. So, I guess as a division of water, we don't have anything to say about best governance. Some people struggle more than others, and we're here to help them all.
So since 2010, utility district commissioners have been required by the legislature to have mandated training. They have to get 12 hours in the first year of appointment and 12 hours every 3 years thereafter, as long as they serve. That same law came on the books for municipalities in 2017. So what the numbers bear out, just like Vina was just saying about utility districts having less issues, it's because their commissioners have been educated for, almost a decade longer, because even before 2010, there were education trainings through TAUD happening. So TAUD provides like a manual, we call it the Commissioner Handbook, that we give every commissioner that comes to a training when that's their first one, that says, this is how you handle these situations, these are the policies. I know MTAS does the same thing with new elected officials for municipalities. I think what we will see is over time, because the municipal side is now also having the required training that is regulated through the Comptroller's office, you will start to see them have more of a consistent standard. I won't call it a gold standard, I'll call it a consistent standard, like utility districts have now. It's a great thing, though, that you're talking about to think about with, we're talking about state strategic planning statewide.
Right.
Is there, something statewide to look at? And that's a fair question.
Yes, yeah. And, again, it's not critical of those folks, because I'm a believer in citizen boards and citizens being on boards, but there are areas in state law where some of the boards are mandated that you have fill in the qualification. So, if it's 4-H, then you're going to have a farmer woman and a farmer man that are on that board. So I'm just kind of thinking along those lines. And then my last question is, I do want to follow Executive Huffman in thanking TDEC and Vina and all the work they've done, and also Mr. Greer, I know you consulted with them. The scorecard is absolutely fantastic, and even though I'll go to some of the board meetings on occasion, actually having that information in front of me, I never knew what I did not know. And that scorecard is vital. And so I'm wondering, are there other plans for the scorecard to kind of further this, incentivize progress, and maybe it's something that gets tied in, such as with ECD and your 3-star, you get points for something. Maybe it's something that I could see Brooksy kind of using to award grants. Are there other things that are planned for that scorecard?
Thank you. Thank you for supporting the scorecard, and we wanted to make it an easy item that you could quickly identify issues. We do intend to make a new version of the scorecard from what we based based on what we've learned with the ARP program and really being able to demonstrate what are the most critical needs. We've talked with Brooksy's group and others about making the scorecard more universal when we look at funding assistance so that we again continue to focus on the same things as we try and help our systems through meeting all of their critical needs. We intend to use the scorecard for the state revolving fund program also, and looking at how we administer those hundreds of millions of dollars. So it has been beneficial. We hope to see a good return on investment and see some of those critical issues be arrested by the use of ARP or maybe SRF funds in the next coming years, and look to continue to use it as a tool.
Great, thank you.
Same. We're going to try to see how we can make it required for some of our grant applications or extra points, whatever we can do to make sure it continues to be updated and continues to be useful for the communities.
Very good. Anything else? Panelists, thank you so much. This has been very informative. And Executive Huffman, I know you brought this to us, and you can see by the length of our discussion today, there is a lot of interest in this very important issue. Thank you all. The last item for today, Carly Van Sickle, Fiscal Federalism Website Update.
And if I may, Chair, I'd like to mention that this is also Carly's first presentation to the Commission.
We'll be very kind, Carly.
Now is it on? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Frank and Commission members. Today I will be providing an update on TACIR's Fiscal Federalism website. In 2017, Commission staff added fiscal federalism information to the Commission's website, presenting information on how funding flows throughout the intergovernmental system. Staff are working to revise these web pages with updated data organized in a new format with more detailed information. In revising the fiscal federalism web pages, Commission staff have several goals, including updating data to include the most recent federal fiscal years, which will now expand to 2022, and organizing data, specifically the data on county reported revenue, into a new format with more categories and subcategories. Previously, data was organized in descending order by state totals, with no subcategories. Organizing the data in a new format will allow for easier cross-county comparisons and will allow staff to easily update the web pages in the future. A majority of the information summarized on the fiscal federalism web pages comes from two sources. Revenue by source data is taken from the Tennessee Office of the Comptroller's County Audit Database, which includes 91 of the 95 counties in Tennessee. While individual county audits are available to the public, this database that the Comptroller's Office has built to compile the audit data is not. Commission staff has worked to make this information accessible and understandable for the average citizen by extracting and organizing the data in a new format. The other type of information presented on the TACIR Fiscal Federalism website is funding obligated by the federal government more generally benefiting each county and not just county governments. For example, agricultural subsidies and direct Social Security and veterans benefits payments. Obligations include amounts that can cross multiple federal fiscal years, such as for multi-year grants and contracts, and do not necessarily reflect the amount of money spent in that federal fiscal year. Fiscal year 2022 was the first year that spending data was widely available in addition to obligations, which will also be included in the Fiscal Federalism Update. This information is publicly available from the federal usaspending.gov website, but is somewhat complicated to access and understand. We are working on organizing and presenting the information from the County Audit Database and usaspending.gov in a format easier for the average citizen to utilize. This would provide a robust picture of the funding to counties in Tennessee. Behind tab 6A are examples of local tax revenue from the County Audit Database for state fiscal year 2021-22 for two counties, Bradley and Roane, compared to the current format. These examples are just a screenshot of the information that will be included on the webpage. In the updated format, one can easily compare the two county governments and see that they differ in their types of amounts of revenue. For example, Bradley County collects city local option taxes, while Roane County does not. Behind tab B are sample federal obligations for federal fiscal year 2021-22 in the new format for those same two counties compared to the current format. These examples are just a screenshot of the information that will be included on the webpage. By comparing the first page of each of these two summaries behind tab B, one can quickly see that federal impact varies by each county's unique situation. For example, the Appalachian Regional Commission obligated $500,000 to Roane County for federal fiscal year 21-22, but none to Bradley County. Additionally, although total U.S. Department of Education obligations for the two counties differ by only about $500,000, $2,285,632 was obligated to Bradley County for higher educational institutional aid, whereas no such assistance was obligated for Roane County. The updated web pages will show greater federal detail for each county. Amounts for all federal obligations performed in each county by department and categories of spending. Commission staff welcomes any feedback regarding the revision of the fiscal federalism web pages. Thank you for your time, and I'll now answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Carly? All right. Thank you so much. Carly, I do have one question. So when we're looking at, like Roane County, for instance, and we're talking federalism, fiscal federalism, we look at the Department of Energy. Those are, so $70 million coming into Roane County. Those are going into DOE-related facilities. That's not necessarily Roane County or municipal government. So, I mean, I know we get some direct funding, for instance, in Anderson, but is that, like if the citizen clicked on that, is there a way where they will understand that that's not something that Roane County government is getting this big check from?
Thank you for your question. So we're planning, on the revision of the website, we're planning on adding, I guess, some footnotes or side notes that you may call them, that explains kind of what we mean by obligations and money that's flowing in, which will explain exactly what you said.
Very good, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just going on the website and looking. It looks like it's all 2015 data. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Right now it is, yeah.
Why are we working with 2015 data?
So that was from the last update, which happened in 2017. So this new update will be current up until 2022. And we are also planning on, the revision will make it easier to update it in the future. So it'll be a lot easier to consistently update and have the current years up there.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Executive.
I did just want to say to Director Lippert, this must be some kind of a new staff initiation. She gets to give a report behind a 2-hour, 4-panel wastewater sewer discussion. So congratulations, Carly, on that.
Anything else? All right. Director, anything for you?
Just two quick things, Chairman. One is the members may leave their docket material here. It'll be fine overnight. And while I'm mentioning docket material, just so our members know, we have a new technology, another new technology initiative that we are exploring as a staff, where in maybe even by the next meeting, these will be a thing of the past, and we're looking at going to just small affordable tablets for the members while they're here to cut down. We did a cost-benefit analysis and figured that this is something that would pay for itself within 2 years and actually save money and trees going forward, and also staff time and preparation for the meeting. We're exploring it. It's not a definite thing. I have discussed it with Chairman Yeager. He supports the initiative, so more to follow.
Very good. Unless there is an objection, we will stand adjourned. Hearing none, we are adjourned. 8:30 here.